I want you to imagine just for a second that you're holding two completely contradictory newspapers from today. Today being April 27, 2026.
Oh, I'm picturing it.
Right, so the front page of the first paper is just screaming in this bold red font that the world is on the absolute brink. I mean, it's outlining a global economic crisis, paralyzed trade routes, and a consumer base that's being squeezed so hard they're practically suffocating.
Yeah, sounds bleak.
Exactly. But then you set that down and you pick up the second newspaper. And this one is poppin' champagne. It is celebrating this historic, gravity-defying boom, highlighting record-shattering corporate profits and a stock market that just absolutely refuses to come down.
Right, and it creates this severe sense of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Because you would assume one of those publishers is just flat out lying to you.
You'd have to, right?
Yeah, but looking at the data crossing our desks this week, I mean, both of those front pages are entirely factually accurate.
And that is the massive, glaring disconnect that we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Looking at the latest intelligence, I mean, we've got everything from FactSet earnings data to global market reports from T. Rowe Price and Bloomberg, and we are just seeing two different planets.
We really are.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out why Wall Street is partying while the physical global economy feels like it's holding its breath. And, what this split reality actually means for your own financial worldview. So let's unpack this, because trying to reconcile a booming S&P 500 with the geopolitical reality on the ground right now, it just feels nearly impossible.
Well, to reconcile it, I think we have to start with the physical constraints of the global economy. Specifically, the energy market.
Right.
Because the baseline reality that's driving all this global macro anxiety right now is oil. We're watching Brent crude top $108 a barrel.
Wow. 108.
Yeah, and that number isn't just some abstract ticker symbol on a screen. It is a direct reflection of the geopolitical gridlock in the Middle East, specifically the Strait of Hormuz, which is, for context, essentially this very narrow waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. I've always thought of the Strait of Hormuz as like the global economy's jugular vein.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, if you pinch it even a fraction of an inch, the entire body starts to panic. And right now, daily transits through that strait have dropped to near zero due to the ongoing conflict with Iran.
Yeah, that jugular is essentially clamped shut. And what's really fascinating here is the multi-layered political standoff that's keeping it that way. I mean, U.S. President Donald Trump has officially extended a ceasefire in the region.
Oh, and that was a move that actually came at the specific request of Pakistan's leadership, right?
Exactly, yeah. But the thing is, while extending the ceasefire, the U.S. is also maintaining a very strict blockade on Iranian ports.
Which sets up this absolutely incredible diplomatic stalemate, because Iran's public stance is to call these negotiations a waste of time. Yet simultaneously, they've actually put a proposal on the table saying, hey, we will reopen the Strait of Hormuz the exact moment the U.S. lifts the port blockade. So it's basically this high-stakes staring contest.
It is. And the economic fallout from that staring contest is so severe that China's President Xi Jinping is actively stepping into the fray now, calling for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire to get the strait reopened.
Wow, so everybody's getting involved.
Yeah, when the world's major superpowers are all converging on one narrow strip of water, it really underscores the gravity of the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't merely some foreign policy dispute. It is a massive pro-inflationary energy shock that basically acts as a tax on every single business and consumer on the planet.
Because if oil sits at $108 a barrel, the cost to manufacture goods, the cost to ship those goods across oceans, and just the cost to keep the lights on in factories, all of that skyrockets. And this puts global central banks in an incredibly tight corner. They are terrified of inflation reigniting from this supply shock, which makes them extremely hesitant to lower interest rates to offer any sort of relief.
Right, which brings us to the collateral damage of this whole gridlock, which is the everyday consumer. I mean, if central banks are keeping borrowing costs high and energy costs are surging, the household budget is what absorbs the brunt of that impact.
And that actually brings up a really bizarre contradiction in the recent data, because I was looking at the U.S. retail sales numbers for March, and the headline number jumped 1.7%.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and according to the analysis from T. Rowe Price, that's actually the fastest pace of growth we've seen since early 2023. So if you just take that at face value, you'd think, wow, the consumer is robust. They're completely unfazed by $108 oil.
Well, yeah, if you only read the top line, sure. But we really have to look under the hood to see the mechanism driving that number, because that 1.7% growth in retail sales was overwhelmingly driven by a 15.5% surge in sales at gas stations.
Wait, really? A 15.5% surge just at gas stations?
Yeah.
So when the financial media broadcasts that retail sales are booming, it's essentially an illusion.
Pretty much.
I mean, it's just masking everyday financial pain. People aren't loading up their carts with new electronics or, going out to nice restaurants. They're literally just swiping their cards at the pump, bleeding more cash for the exact same amount of fuel they needed last month.
Right. They are running on a treadmill just to stand still. The volume of goods they're actually taking home hasn't increased at all. The cost of acquiring the basic necessity of transportation has simply inflated.
That is a brutal reality check because it means that economic growth on paper is basically functioning as a direct tax on the consumer in real life. I mean, how much of this can the consumer base absorb before we see a breaking point?